he's on that cycle, the cycle of addiction, incarceration, homelessness, all of that. It's like that. I lived that whole cycle for many years, and the horses were what helped me, and they continue to, right? They continue to, and the reason I do the work I do now is because of that.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Reinforce the Horse. Today we are here with Kathy Moffatt, and Kathy is an equine experiential learning facilitator, transformational life coach, Reiki practitioner, and writer. Her love of learning brought her down a path of becoming a student of riding, horsemanship, and stable management. She was drawn to dressage, where she studied and competed for a time, but she discovered that it was the art of riding and the horse connection that she loved most. As life challenges presented, a cancer diagnosis, the death of her mother, and her youngest son struggling with addiction, Kathy found herself going to horses. Sitting on a rock, the horses would come and hold space. It was her therapy. She knew there was something profound about this. Her curiosity and intuition led her to a stable practicing equine-assisted learning with children at risk. She became witness to a profound interaction with a beautiful elder mare and a young man. It became a sudden knowing that this was what she was supposed to be doing. She quit her corporate job researching programs and became a student. She began a program based on attunement to emotions, the honoring of the horse as a partner, neuroscience, and profound connection to spirit through shamanic practices. It is all about energetic connection. She launched her practice in 2022. Kathy combines the horse connection with other energetic modalities like Reiki, sound bathing, forest bathing, and yoga, all done in partnership with horses and nature. She is currently working on a book about a mother's journey through adoption, addiction, finding healing, and purpose through horses. Kathy, welcome to the Reinforce the Horse podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, and I'm really quite grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, of course. It's such an honor to have you here. Just based off your bio, there's so much about your story, and I'm really excited to dive in. I want to talk a little bit more about where your horsemanship journey began, maybe your first horse experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say my first horse experience was when I was about 3, and I actually have that photo of me sitting on a horse as a 3-year-old as my screensaver. It kind of reminds me to get in touch with my inner child, and I'm not totally sure where it was taken, but it looks like it might have been at a county fair or something like that. And the expression on my face and the cute little outfit, I must admit, makes me smile. And when I had that experience, that's when it started. There was this energetic feeling about it. So that was the first sensation of being around horses. And I carried that with me until I actually had the ability to have a horse, in my life. My parents were in the military and we traveled a lot. So having a horse was not a possibility, as much as I begged to have a pony for Christmas. I never did get the pony for Christmas because where would you keep it? But instead of having one at that young age, I drew horses. I read all of the books, all of the stuff, and was always connected, even though they weren't really physically in my life. But it was when my father bought a hobby farm. I was about 13, and the hobby farm came with a horse, and his name was Captain. He was a halfling or gelding. And I didn't really know much about riding at all at that point in time. I had been on maybe a couple of sit on the back of a horse kind of experiences, but I certainly didn't know anything about riding. And I taught myself to ride. And back then it wasn't pretty. It was, kick to go, pull to stop. You didn't really know any better, but I certainly managed to stay on more than I came off. And at that point, I really had this strong, it was a strong connection and a strong urge, to be with them. So that's where it started.
Oh, that's beautiful. It sounds like quite a journey from where you began to where you are now. Can you tell us a bit more about that journey, where that journey with Captain led you, or how it led you to where you are now?
Sure. Yeah. So I stayed on the farm with Captain until I went away to college. And so I rode him, around the fields. And again, not probably wasn't pretty, but it was the place that I used to go with him. But, life happens. And I decided I wanted to pursue a career in the sciences. And so I left home to do that. And Captain stayed at the farm. And then the farm got sold and Captain went with the new owners. My father didn't want to take the horse to where he was going. It wasn't a farm situation. And so that relationship, the decision was made for me. And it was bittersweet for me. I knew I didn't have the time anyway. I didn't have the resources to find a place for him. And so he stayed with the farm with the new owners. And then life went on. And the horse connection at that point in time, I would say from about the time I was starting college until, my late 20s, to be very honest, I was not that involved with horses other than maybe going on occasional trail rides at, dude ranches and things like that. I went off to college, I graduated, I worked in the scientific industry for many years. I got married. I got married, and then when we had our children, we bought a farm. And when we bought the farm, that was the opportunity because I had the place, right? So I don't think we were at the farm 6 months before the horses started to come. So there was a period where there was really not a lot of interaction, but the farm allowed for that to happen. And so at that time, I started to take lessons because I realized that I really didn't know a lot about riding. Not from a technical standpoint. And so I figured if I was going to acquire horses, I better learn something about it. And so I started to become a student of riding. And then I bought my first horse. It was a mare named Cricket. And I started out with her riding Western. And I didn't enjoy that so much. And the people in my community mostly were riding English. So I had a relationship with Cricket for a while. And then I'm trying to think of the next horse that came. The next horse would have been Cash, another quarter horse type horse. He came, and I did some riding with him, and I continued to become a student of it all. And I think because I started it later in life than a lot of people do, right? When you become a student, when you're an adult, you really focus on it, the learning, and you do the homework and you do the studying, etc. So I went to clinics, and became a whole student of not only just the riding part, but then the horsemanship part too, because I was keeping horses at home.
And where are you located now? Is it the same farm?
Yes. Yeah. The farm we live in, we've been here since 1996. That's when we bought the farm. So we've been here that entire time. Yeah.
And where is that located?
So I am outside of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, a little southwest of the city. In a relative, well, it is a rural area. The city of Ottawa would be about maybe an hour away. But we're in horse country here. There are some pretty interesting barns where I am, like the high-end kind of competition barns, which you can say what you want about that. But what it does do is it does create a community around it. When you have these kind of barns around, then it develops all around it. And so there's a lot of horse activity where I am.
And do you have other animals or just horses?
Just at this point in time, just horses. Although, since we've been on the farm, we have had all sorts of different animals. When my children were young, we had everything: chickens, cows, ducks, pigs, all of that stuff.
Yeah. So you've had quite a journey. You did mention a cancer diagnosis. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So I was trying to have a child, and we were having fertility issues. And then while we were going through the fertility training, the obstetrician discovered some abnormalities, and in my biology, and it turned out that I had cervical cancer, and this was before the children. My children are adopted because of that. Well, because of that, that's how that all happened. So that would have been, I was in my early 30s, and because of that, I lost the ability to bear children. I was lucky in the sense that the cancer hadn't spread, so the treatment was just a surgical treatment, although they did have to remove all the lymph nodes. So there was a bit of concern about the spread there, but it didn't, thankfully, and I didn't have to have chemo or radiation. And then at that point in time, we were a relatively young couple. We'd been married for a few years, and we really wanted a family. And here, this decision to be able to actually physically bear children was taken away. That was more devastating than the cancer, to be very honest with you. But I decided, actually pretty quickly, I decided that we would pursue adopting. And probably the reason for that is my mother's adopted and my husband's adopted. So I'm surrounded by it. And it was a very natural thing for us to do. So actually, while I was home recovering from the surgery, I started to investigate adoption. And so that's how that piece happened. So the kids came just before it took about a year, and then we adopted our boys. They were toddlers at the time, 18 months and 3 when they actually moved in with us. And we didn't have the farm at that point in time, but when we adopted them, we both decided we wanted to have a farm. My husband came from a farming family, and of course I had that hobby farm experience, and so we were really drawn to go and find a farm. We thought it would be a great place to raise our boys, and so we did. So I think we lived in the house not even 2 years. The house that, when we adopted the boys, the house that we lived in, and then we found the farm and then bought the farm.
Well, so adoption, thank you for that. I mean, that takes a special person. I know it's something that I know clearly I wouldn't be able to do. And I've known plenty of people who have, and it seems like a lot of times there are stories similar to yours, to where the potential for bearing biological children is not there for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. And I don't like to downplay it at all, but it just sort of seems like the universe has a way of kind of orchestrating the right people in that way. Because I think about it in my perspective, I have 2 biological children, and Alyssa, of course, is one of them. And I just feel like it's such a sacrifice to be able to do that. And so from human to human, thank you. I mean, that's a huge thing. And so, were the horses involved in your recovery and your healing from all of that?
Not at that time. The surgery and that cancer diagnosis happened before the farm and before I really had horses in my life. As I said, I did ride a little bit at, I would go on trail rides at these dude ranch places, as I said. So they weren't really involved there. And in some ways, I reflect on what would have been different if they had been. But as you say, I don't think I know. I just have this knowing that the universe, had a plan, and these things happen for reasons. It's part of, I think, our contract when we enter the world. And so they weren't part of the healing then. And they weren't part of the initial adoption story. And I really thank you for your thoughts about that. But, if I think back, to be honest, I just wanted to be a mother. And I didn't think I was doing anything altruistic, by adopting these boys. I mean, because of their age, you can make assumptions about where they came from. They were in the child welfare system in Canada. It's called the Children's Aid Society. So they were foster kids. They were children of a very young mother who herself had been in foster care, and she just did not know how to look after children. She was 16 when she had my oldest son, and they came into care, and we made the decision to go through that process as opposed to going through private adoption, probably because of my husband, because he was adopted, and he was adopted kind of the same way. He was quite a bit younger when he was adopted, like he was closer to being a baby. And he wasn't comfortable with the whole private situation. He felt the public way to go. And maybe in his mind, it might have been a bit altruistic. And me, I mean, to be honest, I just wanted to be a mom. And it's not, I don't think it was a selfish decision, but it was just, I didn't think about it from that perspective. I do think about that now because so much has happened since then and now in terms of their journeys as now they're young men. But so the healing for me with horses happened more, it was always there. Once we started to have horses around us and things would happen in life, I would always find myself going to them and not even riding, right? I didn't need to ride them. I enjoyed riding horses, and I still ride horses, but just to be with them and just for simple day-to-day things that happen in life. What really happened for me with the healing part with the horses was, when my youngest son started to really fall off the rails. He was having all sorts of issues, started when he was about 12. And that in itself is a very, very, very long story filled with a lot of trauma. And when that started to happen, I spent a lot more time with the horses, and it was a subconscious thing. Like as you read in the bio, I have a rock out. It's just out here, like behind where I'm sitting. And I would go sit on the rock, and the horses would come in. They would just come in. And a lot of times I think it was grounding because horses are very grounded. They have 4 feet, right? 4 feet on the ground. They're grounded and they live in their bodies. We live in our heads. Human beings tend to live in our heads, and they would help me get back into my body, and then I would feel better. And so I spent a lot of time doing that. And when my mother died about 12 years ago, it was pretty profound. The things that happened when I was with the horses without really knowing the kind of things I know now, because I've studied a lot of it now. And to be very honest, they saved my life because I was going down a path with my son, and then, losing my mom. I was just lost. And I became, very much, when you're involved, my son, he's still addicted, and he's on that cycle, the cycle of addiction, incarceration, homelessness, all of that. It's like that. I lived that whole cycle for many years, and the horses were what helped me. And they continue to, right? They continue to. And the reason I do the work I do now is because of that. None of what I would be doing now, finding out about how the horses were helping me just in a subconscious body way. It's not a mind thing, it's a body way. And then learning about it. It was a profound feeling of connection. And I discovered the real deep healing. And I felt if they could do this for me, they could do it for others. I just knew it. And so that journey is what led me to doing the work I do now, but it healed me along the way. And there were other things that I did too. I don't want to say that it was just that. There were other things I did too, but a lot of it had to do with the horses. Because they hold space with no judgment. When you're a mother and your child's a drug addict, there was a lot of judgment, right? What kind of parents are you? We live in a small community. There's lots of gossip, and dealing with the judgment, and then you deal with the shame, right? And then you think, what kind of parents are we? There's shame and guilt. Those two, I call it guilt with the sidecar of shame, and you live that. Horses have no judgment, and I think that's the big thing, right? They just hold space, and it was a really big discovery for me, even though I'd been riding a lot. It was that gave me the profound connection. Sitting with a horse, not on their back, just being with them, having them come to me as opposed to me going to get them to go do a task. That's what made the real big difference.
They're incredible at holding space, and I think it's absolutely... It's beautiful that they gave you that experience and that they were with you and helping you heal from that. And even in like starting, it sounds like they helped propel you into the kind of work that you're doing now. Would you be open to sharing more about the work that you do and how the horses partner with you?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll tell you the story about how it all happened. It was, well, it was during the pandemic. And I knew I had to make some other profound changes. And I was working in the corporate world. I worked in the corporate world as a senior manager in the scientific instrument business. And that work was not resonating with me. This capitalistic hellscape that companies are, I just wasn't resonating with me. I had been on this healing path, and it's like, I can't do this kind of work. And so I quit. I just quit my job. And then it was like, oh my goodness, now what am I going to do? And I had a friend, well, she's a really close friend now, more of an acquaintance in the horse industry. And she was working with children at risk. So these are foster children, children in group homes. And she was doing equine assisted learning and sometimes equine assisted therapy when she was working with therapists. And she invited me to her barn to see the work. And I'm a very curious person. I thought, oh, this really resonates. I'm going to go. And so I went, and she was working with this young man. He was about 15 at the time, and this beautiful mare. And I was watching it. I was sitting above, it was in an indoor arena, and I was sitting in a loft above the where the horses were. So I was kind of a viewing area looking down, and the young man was with the horse, and I was watching the interaction, and I had this sensation of extreme knowing. Like, I describe it as a flood, like this, something flooded into my body, like my body just resonated with what was going on. And I felt like, oh, I knew what this was all about. It was like all of the time I had spent with the horses and with my own personal healing, et cetera. And then I had that experience, and it was like, I can't even describe, you can't even put it to words. I just know what it's about, right? It's a connection to the energy, to the spirit, to all of this stuff. So that happened. And once he had finished his activity with the horse, I was chatting with my friend afterwards. And she said to me, Kathy, you need to take this program, because she was going off to take the program she'd taken another program and was going to do another one. And she says, you need to come. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And she also said to me, and she, I don't know how far down the woo-woo rabbit hole you want to go. I don't call it woo-woo. I think it has a lot to do with energy. But she says to me, Kathy, your hands are glowing green. I went, green? Why my hands are glowing green? I said, what do you mean they're glowing green? They're glowing green. And I talk a lot with my hands. She says, stop moving your hands. All this green's coming out. And so she told me she could see auras, and I do believe that. I mean, there are people who can see them. I don't see auras. And then I looked it up. Green's the color of your heart chakra. Green's the color of healing. Of course. So then I went and I took the program. We went together, and I just, that was in the summer. And then I went off, and then I took the program. And when I went to the place that to start the training, when I was driving up the driveway at this beautiful place, I felt it felt like home. It's like, this is where I was supposed to be. And that started at least the training into, because it does require training into how to facilitate this kind of work. It's one thing to go out and say, yeah, go sit with a horse and feel better. And you really do. But there is other ways to connect. And the program opened all of that up for me. Absolutely incredible. So that's how I moved into that. And I finished that in, it's a very intensive program. I finished it in middle of, I graduated in 2022. I started it in 2021, middle of 2022. And then I launched the practice after that. And I just came back they have an advanced program. I took that this past fall. I went back and I took the advanced program, which delves into a lot more ceremony and a bit more spiritual things and shamanic studies and things like that. And we work with a lot of that with the horse, and that opens up so much more in terms of the connection with the horses, and not just with horses, but with nature around you, everything around you. So yeah, so that's how I got there.
It's very cool. I would like to say that there's nothing too woo-woo on this show.
Okay, good.
I think for all intents and purposes right now, we kind of live in an ashram style of this like property that we're at. So that we're very
Awesome.
much connected on an ongoing basis to nature and the horses. I loved what you mentioned earlier about the horses being grounded and, they have 4 legs and 4 hooves that are continually connected to the earth. There's nothing more powerful than that. And like you, I agree. We put these like negative connotations on things. I think woo woo has become one of them. And it's just like, we really are all energetic beings. I mean, we can measure that with the equipment that we have. Like there's something in these meat suit bodies that we're in on this earth that is far beyond our level of cognitive understanding. And so, yeah, nothing too woo woo. And I love the idea of, I think it's Archangel Raphael that is, attached to the color green, the emerald green color in the healing. And so I've definitely, I don't see people's auras myself, not all the time. I have had certain situations, but it's really cool. Like for me, I've been able to just in my sitting and meditation practices and yoga and stuff, it's like these sort of things have been downloaded. And I don't really even like that phrase. They've just kind of been like imprinted in my system. And so you mentioned something like about the training, and I love the idea of training, but I haven't had it, but I've experienced results of, say, like what you would probably refer to as Reiki or such and so forth. So can you first, can you tell us a little bit more about the specific program that you went to and like some of the things that you actually learned in that program?
Sure. Yeah, the program, it's called the FEEL program, and that's an acronym for Facilitated Equine Experiential Learning. And the people that run it developed their program out of Epona Quest, which is Linda Kahana's program. So they studied with Linda. And so it was started by, and Linda, if you've read any of her books, you probably have, such a strong connection to spirit with her and her work. So Wendy Golding and Andre Lecapdieu are the 2 people, husband and wife, that went to Linda's place. That would have been in mid-2000s. I hope I got that right. If Andre ends up listening to this podcast, I hope I got it right. But they went and studied with Linda, and they brought back her practices, and they started their business. And they call the program that. They're in Canada. They're outside of Toronto. And Andre, on top of that, is a student of shamanism. He's a shamanic practitioner. So he, in great depth, they do shamanic work there outside. Well, the horses are always there, but he runs wisdom circles and things with other groups of people that are involved in shamanic work. So that really envelops into a lot of the work. So that's the background of it, and that's where it's come from. The program itself, it's a 6-month program. It's very intensive. And you spend 3 weeks at their facility in 1 week increments over a 6-month period. And then in between you work on activities and do a lot of homework. Like this, it's like taking a university course. And it combines science and spirit together. So there's, you learn a lot about the neurobiology of the horse and neuroscience, and they bring in other people that help teach that. So you learn about, horse behavior, the science behind it. You learn about feeling the horse and feeling the energetic field of the horse in the layers, because horses, they produce an electromagnetic field around their body. And you talk about instruments that measure this stuff. Yes, we all do. Every living thing we all have an electromagnetic field around us. The thing about a horse is it's 5 times bigger than a human's. And so we get training in all about the field, how to work within the field, how to feel the field without using instruments to measure it, getting into your body so your body feels it. And so that's the basis of it, is working within that field. And you learn activities about connecting your heart with the horse's heart. When I have clients, I guide them through heart connections with horses where they will physically feel that energetic connection with the heart. And a lot of the work is heart-based. And then around that, you set intentions. And, when you set intentions, it's energy in your body. And horses they do understand some words, but they don't communicate like we do, as you know. They don't have the same kind of developed prefrontal cortex that we do, but they're so much in their bodies, and they're like this big biosensor. And so we learn all about the horse's biosensor and how to work with people's intentions and work with emotions. There's a lot of work on emotions, how emotions are stored as energy in the body, which is so true. And horses have emotions as well. And so they reflect what's going on with the human. And then as facilitators, we get trained into what to watch for as well. So, and some of that is the science of it, of what to watch for in terms of their behavior, and then what you feel. So it combines, you talked about us being this, I believe we're divine beings living a human existence, the meat suit we carry around. We combine both the embodied stuff, the science, with the other connection piece. And so we get trained on that. We do spend a fair bit of time on, a lot of time on helping clients move through emotions, because invariably what comes up is it's body work, it's somatic work with the horses, and the emotions will tend to flow out if they're having an experience, and then they feel it, and we get them to, okay, what are you feeling? What is that? Oh, that's sadness. Flow through it. We're coached on how to talk people through that. Now, and this is not a therapeutic, the work is therapeutic, but I'm not a therapist. I want to make that very clear. We don't delve into cognitive behavioral therapy or any of that kind of conversation. It's more of a coaching thing as we coach people through, how do you manage this emotions and how do you ground yourself? Because the horses bring it all up. They'll either energetically bring it out or they'll reflect it. And then I'll look at the human and the horse and say, oh, can you tell me about that? And then things just tend to explode. It's an exercise of noticing. You have to really I have to be very much in my body to do the work too, and be able to really notice and feel what is going on. And so that's what the training really does. Yeah.
Very interesting. And I didn't realize it was a kind of shred of Linda Cahona's work. We're actually recording with her tomorrow. So
how cool.
For our listeners, look out for that. It'll come out, a couple weeks after Kathy's session here that you're listening to. Can you give us some, I don't know, examples or case studies, maybe successes, sure, and maybe even some failures? That's one thing that I don't think we've ever really discussed with somebody, sure, about their work in the in this energetic space. Right. And we've had a number of guests, and I think as humans, we kind of tend to tilt toward the success stories, but are there any things that come up, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but are there any failures or things that come to mind that you would just say this person or these people were just this didn't work for me at all?
Of course. For the most part, it takes people a lot of courage to walk in the door, right? Because they're doing something, and most of my clients aren't horse people. I do have a few clients that are horse people, but most of them aren't. And so for them to say come from, and usually people want help with something. I do a lot of grief work. I've taken training in grief facilitation, and I do a lot of work with a local hospice. So you'll get clients like that, and it's very hard to just step through the door, and they don't know what to expect. But the courage to get there to do, a horse guided experiential experience takes courage, right? It's not the norm, right? So for the most part, when people come, they're looking for the experience. They want something to happen, but sometimes there's skepticism and it doesn't happen. And I've had that happen. It doesn't happen a lot, but I've had people come in, and it's usually when somebody has gifted a session to somebody. That's when it typically happens. So somebody decides, I have an example of a girlfriend of mine gifted it to her mother because her mother was going through a tough time and felt it would be good for her mom. And her mother is lovely, a lovely, lovely woman. And she showed up, and I could just feel it from her that she was just not really into it. she was distracted. I tried to get her into her body. It was hard to get her into the body. And she went out and met the horses, and it was nice. And she petted them. And for her, it was just, it wasn't a disaster or anything, but it was just a little visit at the farm. And when you debrief with people after a session, you ask what's come up, has anything come up? And sometimes we pull oracle cards, which tends to be, revealing as well. And she was just very neutral and skeptical about the whole thing. And so that was one experience. And I think it was fine for her. For me, I was disappointed because I knew I could feel the emotions. I'm very, very sensitive to people's energy. And I could feel this burling of emotions in her body. But she didn't want to let it out. She didn't want to be vulnerable. And sometimes people are scared to be vulnerable, which is why I tell my story about my son all the time, because it's a vulnerability that needs to be shared. For one, there are other people out there like that. And I want guilt and shame to go away. And I want people to be able to say, it's okay. We've created a safe space for you to be vulnerable. So that happens. And sometimes when you're working with different populations, I do work with a couple of police officers, and they're trained to have a big, I call it a suit of armor around them. And it's very hard at times for people like that I'm not saying all of them, but I've had a couple experiences where it was okay, but if you're going to stay in your head and not allow me and the horses to guide you into your body and trust that, then it's probably not going to happen. It's just a nice day out to see some beautiful horses, etc. So that's what I would say would happen on the lack of success side. I've never really had any disasters or anybody, run away. I've not had that happen. But on the success side, there's a lot of profound things that happen. And I'll give you a good story because it's just recent in my mind. I was running a retreat it was last month, actually. I run a retreat last month. And my retreats, I mostly work with women, and you'll see middle-aged women, because that's what I'm at. That's who I attract, right? And that's good, because I have a lot of experience, what it's like to be a woman of my vintage and the things I've been through. So that's who I tend to attract. But in this retreat, I had a man sign up. And I thought that takes a lot of courage, coming in as the only man amongst a bunch of women for a 2-day retreat. I thought, wow. I was really honored that he came, and he was really open. I won't get into people's personal stories, but he was searching for something, and he'd never been around a horse before. Never been around horse. He lived in the city, never been around horses. He drove 5 hours to get here. I was like, oh wow, this is very interesting. You've come all this distance, and you're not really the typical person that comes, and you've never even been around a horse. So I took him out to the field, and usually the first activity I do, it's called Meet the Herd. And I'll do it either out in the horse's environment, if the weather is good and it's safe. It depends on the people. Or I'll do it in my stable. I have a barn with stalls. So sometimes if the weather's bad, I'll do it in the stalls. Or if people are really nervous, because I have to protect the horses too, right? I'm responsible for them feeling comfortable as well. And they don't have to do this work, right? They're sentient beings. They make a choice, right? So we go out into the field, and I have this, a horse here. His name is Keenan. He's this beautiful chestnut gelding. He actually is not one of the horses that I'm personally responsible for. I hate using the word ownership. I just say I'm financially responsible for 6, but there are 9 on the property. So 3 of them are boarded, and he's a boarded horse. I have lovely boarders. They allow me to work with the horses as long as the horses want to do the work. And he doesn't always want to do the work. And this gentleman walked out in the field, and Keenan came right up to him. And there was no fear, like right up to him, wrapped his head like a horse hug around his body. It was beautiful to watch. It was amazing. I thought, my goodness, he doesn't usually do that. And when I do this activity, I note things. Oh, that's interesting. See what horses have come up and showed up and want to do the work. He clearly did. So then later on, we were doing an activity in the round pen, which is a one-on-one activity. And I decided I'm picking this horse to work with this man. It just makes so much sense. So I bring the horse in, and he looks and he smiles. He sees him. He goes, oh, I'm glad you picked him. And they're in the round pen together, and they're having this. It's a reflective activity where you basically set a heart's desire, and you go into the round pen and you tell the horse what your heart's desire is. And these are beautiful interactions. Because of the energy all around it. And I have lovely photographs of this as well. And we're watching it, and I was working that day with a co-facilitator, which when I have a large group, I do for safety reasons, and plus you get different eyes on it. And then she says to me, Kathy, did you notice his leg? This is the client's leg. And I said, no, I didn't. She says, well, he's got, his leg was swollen. He has lymphedema, which is, I don't know if you know what that is, but the lymph nodes get blocked and it's a permanent swelling. And I didn't hear the story, but she told me the story, how it had happened. And then I looked and it was very noticeable. Well, the horse that picked him also has lymphedema in the same leg. And because she knew the horse had that, and now the client didn't notice that at the time. And then I'm like, oh my God, the same. In a horse, it's called lymphangitis, but it's the same thing. And so we pointed out to him. It took him a while because he's not been around horses to figure out, my goodness, this horse has a really stocked up leg. And it never gets fully down. And he looked at it and he says, the horse is me. He says, I felt all along the horse was embodying me. The horse is me. And they had the same thing. So we say a lot of times, and these kind of things happen all the time. And I'm not going to swear on your podcast, but you can't make this blank up. I'm going to get a t-shirt because this stuff happens all the time. And to make it even more interesting, so I know the horse picked him for that reason. There was a feeling, and it's energy, right? There's probably some pain or pressure in both individuals. They gravitated. And later on that day, when I turned the horse back out to be in the field, and I looked at him, the swelling had gone down quite a bit in the horse's leg. And I said, oh, isn't that interesting? The next morning, he comes back. So it was a 2-day retreat, and they were staying at a bed and breakfast. He comes back the next day, and then the client, he comes in, he says, oh, my leg, it's not as swollen today. It's like, really?
Fascinating. It's so
cool. It is the coolest thing. Yeah, it's the coolest thing. And these kind of things, happen all the time. I have miniature horses as well that I work with that are mother and son. And then I had one woman out who has a son in a similar situation than mine. I have a lot of clients that, are parents of addicts or parents that have lost their children to addiction as well. I have clients like that too. And this woman had come out, and the minis were very interested in her, and her son is in the throes of addiction where he doesn't want to have anything to do with her. And the minis were mirroring that in their body language. The mare was all over her. So it's a mother and son. The mare was all over this woman in the field, and the mini was way off in a shelter. He wouldn't come. And normally they're together. And it was like, and I knew the story, and I'm like, oh, isn't this interesting? The mare is here to comfort her, mother to mother. That's the feeling that I got. And when we took them later and put them in the round pen, and we talked about it as well, and she said she felt the same way. So this is when it really works well, when the client feels it the same way. And so we did an activity in the round pen with her, and we brought both of them in. Well, she sees both of the horses and she starts to cry because she's like, oh my goodness. I said, well, if you don't want to do the activity with these two, I think there's some things to resolve here. We'll get another horse. But the minis clearly wanted to be there. And then watching how the little gelding would come in and out and roll around and look a bit sullen and grumpy, and the mare kept circling the mom. And normally these two horses are like, stuck like glue. It was just, and to watch it, it was just amazing. So these kind of things, I could tell you story upon story upon story of these beautiful things that happen, amazing things that happen.
They're such powerful animals, and the more that I talk to people, the more that I hear people talk about their experiences with equines in general, the more I believe that they really do exist on a higher plane than we humans do, because and you'd mentioned earlier on in the podcast, like they don't pick up the verbal, like we have to teach them verbal cues, but they don't understand verbal, like English language. They understand more like energy and body language. Some will say it's more body language, but these two stories, these two experiences come right back to this one friend of ours. She had a cancer diagnosis and a horse that had a cancer diagnosis, and two separate cancers. But as she's healing her journey, her horse is also healing. And recently, I mean, this horse has just recently been cancer free. And it's a fascinating, like, that brought this up as well. But earlier on, you had mentioned vulnerability, and I would love to ask if you've had any experiences where your horses or equines that you're working with have shown vulnerability to either you and or your clients you're working with within your sessions.
Yeah. Wow, that's a very good question. Well, horses will show vulnerability in many ways, but one of the more profound ways they do is by lying down and showing their belly, because the belly on a horse is where they're vulnerable, because horses are typically, food for cats. Typically, we're things that attack horses, mountain lions and things like that, not so much coyotes and things. And so that's a very vulnerable area. And I have had experiences in sessions where a client we create a sacred space around the round pen. They're free to be vulnerable, and things are coming up with the client. And then the horse lies down and rolls and rolls. And it's not because they're itchy. It's because of this. And now sometimes it's a bit of energy transference, depending on what's going on from human to horse. If there's trauma, sometimes the horses get that on them too, and they have to roll it off. But it's the way they do it. And sometimes we'll do a meditation around the round pen, where we'll have a couple of horses in the round pen, and then have the clients. So we have a group of people, like at a workshop, and we'll get people to do a body scan and gradually get into their bodies, and invariably horses lie down. And in that case, the vulnerability, they feel safe to be vulnerable, right? So we create the cone of safety with being in our bodies. So if you're meditating and you're getting out of your head and you're getting into your heart and into your gut, that energy is palpable to the horse, and it creates this container of safety, and they will often lie down. So that is a good sign of releasing that. Yeah, it's really beautiful. It wasn't related to what I do, but I went to a clinic last year with a practitioner, and that kind of thing happened where I was auditing the clinic, and must have been 25 of us watching, and there were 6 people, horse and rider combinations. Nobody was mounted. Everybody was holding, the horse at a very light, it had a lead rope and a halter on, but they were all just standing. And when we originally had walked into the room, these horses some had shipped in, and so you're at a clinic, and they're a bit, in a different space, and you could feel this heightened energy in the room. So the clinician took everybody through it was kind of like it's like a body scan, grounding meditation, and 3 of the 6 horses lay down. And then I thought, oh, I'm at the right place. This is the right clinic to go to. This is the right clinician, and these are the right people, right? So yeah. So yeah, very, very cool. And yeah. And then again, vulnerability. You can think about it. Horses coming in from outside. Oh, what's going to happen at this clinic? And you do that, and they all lie down. Well, not all of them, but half of them lay down. You can't make it up.
That's great. It reminds me of, you can't make it up. It reminds me of James French's trust technique. And
yes,
I know there's other practitioners that have different ways of approaching that. I wanted to give a shout out for our listeners who may have not heard of this episode that we had referencing the person that Alyssa just mentioned. Her name's Tara Coyote. She's a dear friend of ours now, and a fascinating story. And so you can find her on episode number 42 of Reinforce the Horse. And so feel free to go out and have a listen about her story, and you can check out her book and such too. And then Kathy, you mentioned oracle cards. You kind of brushed over that. Can I bring you back to that topic?
Sure.
Because for Alyssa and me specifically, or Alyssa and I specifically, we've had quite awakening around the whole oracle and tarot aspect of energy reading, and it's nothing short of amazing. I could write an entire probably volumes of books on it over just the past year. But just a shout out and kind of plug for Alyssa's work. She's got, things in the works, creating with Willow, her Mustang, who paints with her. She's actually working on developing a oracle deck that's painted by Willow. And so there's more of that coming out. So if you want to follow her, to our listeners, that's at willowpaints.com. And but yeah, tell us more about your work with Oracle, and because I think you mentioned you might start out with clients or something in that way.
We pull them at different times. Usually, actually, when I'm first starting with a client, we pull it at the end of a session. Because sometimes people walk in and if you whip out cards and people are like, oh my goodness, what is this, right? Because sometimes people are a bit skeptical about cards. So I typically will work with them at the end of a session. And I work with a variety of decks. A lot of them are horse decks, but not all of them. Most of them are around nature. I have a tree deck I work with, an animal spirit deck I like to work with, and then there are a few horse decks. And what I do is we'll have a session. Invariably, things come up, and it's how we end the session and how I frame it with clients, because some people, out of respect for people, some people have never even seen them. And then some people get a bit, oh, is this like witchcraft? And they're thinking, because some people think tarot is witchcraft. So you have to be a bit careful. So what I do say to my clients is, would you like to pull an oracle card? They'll ask, well, what is that? I explain what it is. And then I rest their fears or their trepidation by saying, it's just, at minimum, it's fun and the cards are pretty and you might get a nice message for the day. And certainly a lot of these horse cards are beautiful, beautiful works of art, and they're just lovely to look at. So at minimum, looking at something pretty, awesome. But I say you could get a profound reading, right? So, we just typically pull, they're different cards. A lot of times it's the holding of the deck and setting an intention, and then, a question, but not a yes, no question, something you want guidance on. Most of the cards, if you work with them, that's how I'm working with them. And invariably, I would say 95% of the time I've had clients cry. Clients will say to me, oh my God, you've blown my mind. Not me, but the card. It's amazing. And I like doing it after the work. The reason being is the client, after the work, they've experienced the energy of the horse. Usually something has come up. There's some knowing, there's some release. And so they're more in their body anyway, and they're curious, and they have that energy about them. And the cards work only really, in my opinion, work when you're receptive to it. And because most of the people are receptive, they get tremendous messages. And so and actually pretty much after every session, we do that. And if some clients come regularly and we switch the cards to make it more interesting. And I do have a deck that actually how you choose them. And it's one of my favorite ones to use. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. If you're interested, I can send the details to you later. But these ones, you actually spread them all out. And what you do is you pick the artwork that resonates with you. So you tell your clients to go over and look at it and say, pick a card that really resonates with you, and don't think too much about it. Like, go to whatever you pick. And so they're looking at the image on the back, which relates to the message. So there is this little bit of, how would I put it? There's an energy around it, but there's also this visual about it too. That why am I picking a card of this color, and why is it with two horses and a woman, or why is it with a herd, this kind of thing. And then they pick those cards, and those ones are really, they're amazing. People are just, and some people want to take the cards when they leave. Well, I say can't. I let them take photos, right? You're not taking my cards. I'd have to buy more decks because people like the artwork. So that's how I work with them. And usually it's a single card pull. I've not done multiple card pulls, although I do a lot of other things here. kind of combined with the horse work. And I have card readers when I have a retreat. The people that actually do that come, and then they will do readings with multiple cards or do tarot and that kind of thing. But yeah.
So I've got a bit of a piggyback on that. And before I get that, I just want to give another couple shout outs, because I know we've had some amazing guests on that have not only created these decks, but do some work with them as well. One that comes to mind right off the top is Kate Nelligan. She's episode number 45 on Reinforce the Horse. And she has a card deck called Awakening with Equines that just recently came out. And so I encourage you all to take a look at that. And then Alyssa, you might know, because I'm drawing a blank on this, but Kim McElroy, she also has a deck. Did she do the artwork for Katie's deck? No. Okay, but Kim McElroy has another deck that I think that she worked in. If my memory is kind of foggy on it, but I think she did some work with Linda Kahonov on that as well. So it's kind of a small world. The more we connect out with people, and it's kind of fascinating. At this point in my life, I know there's a lot of naysayers out there, and I don't really get into that energy anymore. I used to. But I just know, I grew up in a very Protestant Christian sort of environment. So even the thought of energy reading of any sort was you're almost hellbound, just by virtue of bringing that in. And I think that there's some reasons for that from a dogmatic religious perspective, but I don't feel like there's a reason for that from a loving human being perspective.
Yeah.
But with that said, I mean, these things can be used to the detriment of people. I mean, that's why we have stuff like black magic and negative energy that can be used. So there's a quote, where attention goes, energy flows.
That's right.
And I'm reminded of that. And it seems like, to me, the horses help to kind of create a positive energy space, much like like a crystal, like maybe a clear quartz or something would, and so then when you're, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, as far as, because I don't necessarily pull cards and read them. I like the entertainment value, if nothing else, of people reading that energy. But to me, it's just a tangible physical object that we can bring and use to link into the energy flows. Is that right?
Yeah, I agree with that. And it can be a bit of a touchstone too. So in my case, when I've had a session with a client and then they're getting ready to leave, you often wonder, okay, well, what are they going to take with you? And sometimes doing that at the end, where they actually take a photograph of the card and the message, is something that can stick with them and remind them of their session. And the messages, I say, are usually, well, in most cases, I mean, they're not always blow your mind profound, but sometimes it's just the thing that they needed to hear at the moment. So it's a bit of a reminder. And I think that the horses for sure open it all up because of just the way they are. And then there are other things you can, plug into that, yoga with horses. Like we do that here too. And other things where the opening happens with the horse, and then, okay, then where do we take it from there? How do we have more healing or more self-awareness or more authenticity, right, about ourselves, by working with these other things? And that's where I believe the cards fit in.
Yeah, and it's just like you said. I mean, it's all about being open and receptive. I mean, if we're closed off to anything, nothing's going to work. I mean, this goes back to the discussion on allopathic medicine versus alternative therapies for any number of different ailments or diseases. I know I was diagnosed with leukemia back in 2017, and sitting here today, I've never felt better in my life. And it's not, I mean, at a surface level, we could call it miraculous, but really what it's about is like being open and receptive to this idea. And it's not really even an idea, it's a law, it's a fact that being human is absolutely super. It's fantastic. And we not only hold, but we wield a great measure of power just by being human. And we often discount those things. And then it seems like things like reading different energies, whether it's through a card or through sitting under a tree or connecting with a horse or any number of things, we tend to shy away from that. And in my mind, it's because we're afraid of what ultimately comes forward in those situations. And it's not magical. You also mentioned witchcraft, which I think has a very negative connotation to it. But the more I've even come across that terminology, really what it is connecting with our indigenous roots and the natural environment from which we come. Now, I know that can be pulled out, and we can actually pull energy from the earth and cause it to work in negative ways and in dark and harmful ways. But I think largely we put these very strong stereotypes and such. I mean, what was it in the 1800s? People were being burned at a stake, you know, and thrown into bodies of water with weights attached to them for things that we're even talking about right now. You know, it's just kind of mind blowing.
It is. And you're right about the words, these words. You brought up earlier woo-woo, right? I don't like the word either because it's not that, right? It's just because it's labeling something and making you not really, you're even kind of joking about it when you say that. And witchcraft, you get the connotation of the woman in the black hat that's going to go eat your children, right? So, and unfortunately, I mean, in history, we've had, I mean, we're all indigenous people at some point in time in our life, regardless of where we've come from. You know, I have a, I'm a white woman, but my ancestors came from Scotland, and the indigenous people there would have been the Celts and the Druids, and they had all of these kinds of practices, and the medicine people or the shamans or whatever they were called were the key healers and knowledge keepers in these communities, and this is true all over the world. The problem I find now, and it's happened actually in relatively recent time. If you think about the history of man, at least recent time in the Western world, that we've stripped away from that and replaced it with and I don't have anything against organized religion. Don't get me wrong. I grew up in the Protestant church too. I know all about that, and I'm married to a Catholic. So, but that being said, a lot of these practices scared a lot of this organized religion, and they were we want to be able to control the masses to a certain extent, and you can't connect directly to spirit. You've got to connect through somebody, and it is a control thing. Aside of all the beauties of being part of a church community, and that's the beauty of it. The other stuff, I don't know. I have really mixed feelings about it, and that's what caused a lot of this burning at the stake and throwing people into the water because of the concern and being scared of these kinds of practices. And I live in a country where we tried to assimilate our indigenous people by throwing them in residential schools, and it's horrible. And that's in recent time. I mean, some of these schools were certainly still going in my lifetime, right? And these are people that were very attuned to the natural world and to the plant medicine and to the spirits and very connected to horses and things like that. And we need to get back to that, because right now we're not headed in a great direction, So how do we get back to that? We get back to that. I mean, is it my opinion? Okay, it's my opinion, but it's also my knowing, right? I know that is what we need to get back to. And horses help with that.
And I think of course. And I think there's so many people on the planet that are taking that route. I think that's just the evolution of this podcast here has been, part of that. Like Alyssa and I never thought we'd be talking to people about this stuff. Like I know I didn't, and but there is a movement, there's a strong movement across the planet in both directions, and I feel it very positive. I wanted to ask you, when you brought up the man that came to your retreat, and this hit home, just that story, because I'm a military veteran, but I'm also a very strong empath and a very sensitive man, you would say. And I have come to find that that's quite a strong quality to have. But growing up, especially in the 90s, and I love, like, Warwick Schiller always talks about, like, kind of the, growing up in the era of, like, don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about sort of thing. And, like, being a man, you have to be like this sort of macho, patriarchal, overbearing personality type. And of course, that's at least in my time in the military, there were definitely situations like that. So my question about that is, like, and you even mentioned it, it's very rare for, like, a man to show up at, like, your type of retreat. It's not like your target audience, so to speak. I'm actually moving into what I feel like part of my calling is in the next phase of my life, is to actually attract men in that way. And to, like, because I believe that every avatar or God man, if you will, like the Buddhas, the Jesus, that have walked the face of the earth, they have a perfect balance between the masculine and feminine energies, which I don't believe has anything to do with gender. I think each gender, no matter how you orient yourself, has masculine and feminine energy. And when those are in perfect balance, we have what we would consider a deity. That's just my own, like, interpretation and belief system about it. So I think a lot of men are stuck in this day and age in the old patriarchal way of being. But men that I've talked to are, like, aching almost to break out of that, and to, like, I see a lot of, like, small young boys who are just like, mama hold me, that sort of thing. And, like, they're certainly not getting that, and then that causes a lot of distension in a marital relationship, or any type of relationship for that matter. So I guess my question is, can you, like, shed some light on that interaction that you had, and have you had more? Do you have any suggestions for men who are out there maybe listening to this podcast, who are trying to break out of that mold that society has created?
Wow. I mean, there's so much I could say about all of that. First of all, I just want to congratulate you for having the courage to stand in your authenticity. That's beautiful. And there are lots of men that feel the way that you do, but for whatever reason aren't willing to articulate it. Judgment, shame, all of these things, right? So all of these things we pour on ourselves. I think there is a big room and a big opportunity for men to gather like women do. And in the field that I work in, and I'm just speaking for myself and who I attract. When I had a man show up on my retreat, he registered online. He didn't know me at all. He said somebody, and he wasn't even recommended by a friend, because sometimes people will register and they were referred. It was a random thing. So that's not lost on me. He just showed up, right? And it gave me pause to think, how come I'm not attracting more men? So I've been thinking a lot about that. What can we do to make the space safe for men? or how can we bring men into the space to hold space for other men? So there's two aspects of looking at it that way. I feel that we have to stop demonizing men, and I think that's a and I know we talk about the patriarchy, and we could get in conversation about, the church, and it's all run by men and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's historically that's what that is. But by demonizing at times and continuing this judgment that men can't necessarily be like you've just articulated is really wrong. And I think women as well have a responsibility to hold the space and open that space too, and not try to shield ourselves off in what, the divine feminine, which is beautiful too. I mean, I spent a lot of time working with that kind of energy, and most of the people I work with women. But you've got me thinking about how do we open it for men, and how it opens is for people like you to step into your authenticity and invite it in, right? However that looks. And it gave me pause to think too, and this is just kind of a, well, I guess it is a marketing thing. I'm actually going to retool, particularly for retreats. I'm going to retool my retreats to make it even look less. It's not that I'm specifically looking for a gender, but when I look at it, I think, this will appeal to women. Maybe there's a way to make it a little bit more inviting. Or maybe it doesn't have to be. I don't know. I did have one person come, but that's really, other than couple, I work with couples. So with a couple, they come together. So it's usually the woman dragging the man, which is fine. And that's beautiful work as well. But I can say I've been practicing a couple years now. This is the only man that has come on his own. Any other man that's come, I had to work with a teenage boy. His mother dragged him along. And then the women are dragging the men to couples work. So there is opportunity there. And there's lots of work to do with men, right? And I think having maybe men move into this space and do this kind of work, a facilitation kind of work, because I can't think of, I honestly, and they may be there, I can't think of, in the space that I'm in, of the people that I know that work in this space, I can't think of any men that are actually do well, other than the place I took my training. That's actually interesting. And he runs the place now. His wife, Wendy, passed away, so he runs it. And he is the perfect,
that's interesting.
He's the perfect embodiment of the feminine and the masculine. And he comes from, he's got it. And I have lots of yang energy too. I worked in the corporate world for 25 years, in science and tech. I was usually the only woman there. So I got good at the yang stuff. But you can do both, right? We have both, right? And he embodies both. And he comes from a strong business and marketing background too, but he's able to, he just, because he's being authentic, he's letting it come out. He's not listening to what society says, and particularly, particularly if you're a white man. Geez, society is so hard on white men because of a bunch of bad actors over here. It's just so unfair. There's no discourse and there's no nuance in conversation. That's the other problem too. We get in these divisive little boxes, and then there's no nuance of crossing over and having conversation and opening up the space. So there is, I think there's a real place for that.
Totally agree. And I feel like there's just such a imbalance in the energies, and then a lot of men are afraid to acknowledge that they undoubtedly embody feminine energy for, like, in the era I grew up in, is like for fear of being called a sissy or gay even. Which to me, it's like, it's so fascinating. And I guess I'm a Gen Xer. I don't really know, but I grew up in the 80s, or 80s and 90s. And just that aspect of being called gay for being like, like that was a term that we would like throw around derogatorily, is derogatorily a word?
It is now.
But and it has nothing to do with like sexual orientation.
No.
And nor does the feminine energy. In fact, like throughout all recorded history, feminine energy is actually like the like entire civilizations were ruled by feminine
Mm-hmm.
energies, and they were very strong, and
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, I can go on a rant about this, but
Mm-hmm.
the idea for me is that I just see a lot of men who are hurting, and specifically
Mm-hmm.
because of the imbalance. And I feel like horses, and we've talked about this a decent amount, that horses are a perfect embodiment of that energy.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you can't be strong and be a fighter and like, and in fact, um, recently I heard Tu Lam on the Next Level Soul podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and Tu, he's a prior, I believe, Green Beret Special
Mm-hmm.
Forces, uh, top of the line, Army commando, and the way he just talked about like the way he found balance with his male and or not male, see, I even pull it out, like I pull out the gender, but
Mm-hmm.
the way he found balance between the feminine and masculine energies after over 2 decades worth of war, and uh it just, it kind of blows my mind. So he's one that comes to mind, that he's out there like assisting those who are, coming up. So I do feel a shift in that way. And perhaps we can connect with the person that you mentioned that trained you, because that
Mm-hmm.
would be, sounds like a really good interview to have on the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you would find. Yeah,
um,
I can connect you to him for sure.
Man, this is all so wonderful. It's there's we could go on and on talking about so much between the horses and the work that you do and everything. As we close up, what is your favorite way to reinforce your horses?
By giving them choice and letting them say no. Even with the work I do, the people have this idea that if the horses that do this kind of work are the retired horses, you can't ride them anymore, and we're going to do this work with them, and it's not hard on them because they're not being ridden, and we'll just do the work. And there are practitioners. I mean, I've run into some that it's not that it's horrible, but I don't think horses want their bodies painted, right? I just don't think they do, right? So things like that. So they have the ability. I stand up for them and reinforce them by allowing them to say no. And if I'm having sessions and a horse is like, I don't want to be part of this, that's fine. The grief work I do can be energetically, depending on the activity. Horses can take some of that energy, and I can feel it. We always clear the horses afterwards. That we have a mechanism of energetically clearing them. And I have my one mare, Lily, and my big beautiful black mare. The last grief session, she said to me, "I just need a break from this for a while," and I listened to that. Right, so. Yeah, it's allowing them to say no, regardless, of what your expectations are, right? And not being attached to any outcome that's going to happen. If you're not attached to the outcome, then it's just so easy to allow them to say no, and then not let anybody judge you for saying, "Oh, you're not going to bring the horse in to do this." Well, I mean, why not? I mean, you're the one that pays for him. I'm like, it's not about that. Yeah, so they have the ability to say no.
I absolutely love that. I don't really ride anymore at all. And I mentioned this a number of times, like horses entered my life in 2019. They were kind of like all-terrain vehicles to me. I treated them as such. I didn't get very far along in that mindset, but then with the whole shift in my being and my consciousness and my spirituality and everything else, I actually with my horse Cody, he's a Bashkir curly gelding. I actually have a poem that I wrote about this, is like called about dismounting instead of riding and acknowledging that choice. And so I retrained him from the ground up. And most typical horse people would say that I totally obliterated the training that he already had.
Yeah.
But I taught him that he did have choice and acknowledged that. And so now I joke around, like when I go up to Cody and say, "Hey, Cody, can I get on?" And he knows yes or no. And it's nearly always a no.
Mm-hmm.
And I always respect his no, because I don't need to ride. If riding is a thing for me, it's not like I have a job to get done or a war to go fight. You know, Cody's not in a work type situation. And even then, I think choice can go a long way in those situations even, but that's for a whole nother talk. But when Cody tells me no, I respect that and I acknowledge that. And the few times that he does say yes, it's like such an amazing connection. And so I really appreciate that, because that's the way I reinforce my horse as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's also so beautiful. Choice is such a powerful thing, I think, with and for all living things. And I love that you're able to give that to your horses, not only in your work that you do with them and your clients, but on a day-to-day as well. Is there anything further that you'd like to, any last words of wisdom you'd like to send over for our listeners today?
I don't know if I've got any last words of wisdom. I guess I would just, say, just reiterate that, horses are divine beings. It's not lost on me. You can find horses of all, I think about all animals that are on the planet. You can find horses everywhere. Not all animals are like that, right? You can find horses on all continents. They have been with man since man came about. There is this strong spiritual connection, I believe, with horses as guides. I would say that we need to think more about that, moving forward with our relationships, with our horses, and at the same time apologize. I do this all the time. I mean, I think of all animals on the planet, horses deserve the biggest apology from humanity because of how we have used, and I'll use the word used. I never use the word used in my practice, but how we have at times used them as tools over hundreds, thousands of years. And so, but they're still with us because they're supposed to be with us. They really are. There is a divine reason that they are with us. I believe that. And I think the more we pay attention to that, the better, the better our relationship will be, and it'll be better for humanity, because if we're paying attention to that, then we're going to be like that with everything else. We're going to think about our relationship with the planet as a whole. Should we really be cutting down all these trees that are screaming, "Don't cut me down"? These kinds of things. So I think the horse has those messages for us. So I guess that would be the last thing I would say.
Yeah. Very wise words, and thank you so much for articulating that. If you wanted to give just a quick shout out verbally, your website, and of course we'll post links to the things that you mentioned and your website in the show notes page. But if you just wanted to give a quick shout out on how people could reach you.
Yeah. Well, you can find me on my website. It's Rito Breeze Stables and Wellness Center.com. I realize that's a mouthful, but if you Google Rito Breeze Stables, you'll find it. All my contact information is there. I'm also on social media as Rito Breeze Stables on Facebook and Instagram. It's Rito Breeze _. I don't do as much on Instagram. I find too many social media things. It's hard to keep up on top of them. But yeah, you can find mostly through Facebook and the website, and and all the information is there. I have a blog. As I mentioned, I'm writing a book. So I have on my website excerpts, little essays I've written that are, some will be parts of the book, some won't. So there's examples of my writing there. If people are interested in exploring that. That's
very cool.
That's about it.
Fellow author.
Yes.
We've got a couple books coming out as well.
I saw that on your website. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Kathy, it's been so great getting to know you today, and we've really appreciated the conversation.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
thank you
look
so much for
forward to
inviting
keeping
me.
in touch and maybe having you on again sometime in the
Yeah,
future.
thank you so
Okay.
much. Such an honor to have you.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It was my honor as well.